Welcome everyone, welcome guys, and welcome gals. This is yours truly, a cameo of Lucky Optics here speaking. As you may have noticed, I have published some amount of videos, of draft videos in Italian on my channel because I speak from Italy. Now, for a change, we will do a draft in American. We will cater to the American public. As you also may have noticed here, we are qualified tomorrow for the qualifier weekend. It will be up to 9 matches of a traditional foundation sealed. So maybe I will put out a video of that. As of now, we are drafting the best set that has come out recently. Pioneer Masters, we are at Diamond 4, and we are gunning for a mythic ranking. As always, as I've said in my previous videos, it is suggested that I should speed up my my videos because I tend to be quite verbose and rambling, long-winded in my explanation. I tend to take really long turns explaining every possible permutation and a possibility of what can and cannot be done on the board. So it's best for you to speed up my videos and go on from there. Now, speaking of this pack, what do we have here? Our rare is basically useless. It's a land. It's Urberg. It does nothing. The best card of this pack is a Phalanx Leader, heads and shoulders above everything else. There's not really that much else as a consideration except for a Wild Slash, which is a really good common, one of the best performing red commons in the entire set. But Phalanx Leader is a card that basically wins on its own in Boros, Heroic, White-Red Heroic. It's also fine in Green-White or Blue-White Flyers. In basically any white deck that can support a double white pip in the early stages of the game, Phalanx Leader is a slam dunk out of this pack, and nothing really does compare. Simagor is fine in a blue red. Imposing Sovereign is a card that I would like to add to my white deck, but obviously Phalanx Leader is better. Now, continuing this trend, now the best card out of this pack is probably Ruinous Path, which is phenomenal. It's a 3 mana sorcery, Hero's Downfall, destroy target creature or planeswalker for 7 mana. You get to put 4+1/+1 counters on one of your lands, turning it into a 4/4 elemental for the remainder of the game until it gets removed. But obviously, I cannot play a double white card and a double black card altogether. Plus, Phalanx Leader wants you to play a lot of creatures and a lot of tricks and pump spells and ways to trigger Heroic. Labyrinth Champion also wants you to do the same. But I think we will stay in our path and pick not the best card of this pack. Knight of the White Orchid. It's just fine. It's fine-ish, but it's still a good card. So I will take that. Now there's a lot of black. Now there's too much black to pass up. We can still end up in Arzhov and pick Omnix's Cruelty in black white. If I have to go mono white with a black splash, I definitely want to splash some removals, yeah, in the premier removal color, which is black. Now, Cruelty is better than Stab Wound, is better than Cruel Revival. Cruel Revival can be a 2-for-1, but the efficiency of Obnix's Cruelty and the fact that it exiles is really unmatched. No removal is close to this card's power level in the whole format, at the very least at common rarity. There's also Selesnya Charm, which is really good, but it does commit you to green-white. We don't know if we are white. As of now, we are two good cards, but we are not marrying. We did not marry the color. We may still end up in a different color. Now, for this pack, Nantuko Husk is really good in black white specifically. So if we want to go black white, Nantuko Husk is on on par with uncommons in the color combo. There's also Honored Hydra, is a really really good card. This is really good in black green specifically because black green tends to self mill with a undead butler, with a commune with the gods, so that she can embalm this card from the graveyard with 4 mana without Honored Hydra passing from the battlefield. But for us, the pick will be Thunderclap Wyvern, clear cut above the rest of the cards in this pack. It's a white card, it's white blue, it's a gold card, but white blue is a really good archetype, so we might end up in this. Maybe Swift Dragoning is never wheeling, but maybe Pilgrim's Eye wheels, and Pilgrim's Eye appreciates the pump from the Wyvern. It also fetches a land, which might be good because even if we are 2 colors, we're not splashing anything. Having access to some fixing when you're playing double colored cards is really good. Now, the pick is clearly Ardenvale Tactician. It's a really good card. It's one of White's best commons. It also combos out with Phalanx Leader because with the adventure with Dizzying with Swoop, you can target your own creatures to trigger Heroic. So it's a +1/+1 counter on each one of your creatures at instant speed without even spending a spell. We're spending half a spell, only the adventure part. It's also a 2/3 flying creature that appreciates Wyvern boost, so it's definitely Ardenvale Tactician. Now I really want to be white, and Kabira Takedown solidifies us into our choice. This is a tapped planes, which is also an instant. It's a removal. It deals damage equal to the number of creatures you control. But if we are heavy white, we will have a lot of creatures. Phalanx Leader also wants us to have a lot of creatures on board, so it's definitely this. There's also Sejiri Shelter, which is good. It's the same concept. It's a modal double phase card, which is a tapped planes, and it's also a protection spell for our Phalanx Leader, our Thunderclap Wyvern, etc., etc. But this is a common, this is an uncommon, so it's possible we get past another Sejiri Shelter, another Kabira Takedown. It's more ambitious to hope to get that passed to us. Uh, and as I say this, obviously, Magic Gods say no to this. Say here's another Kabira Takedown. I'm not mad. I'm pretty happy. There's also Coordinated Assault, which is probably the best trick in the format. For 1 mana, you get to give a +1/+0 and a first strike to 2, up to 2 target creatures. So you can trigger Heroic twice. If you're Boros, this card is at a premium. It's definitely a second or third or fourth pickable in Boros Heroic specifically. But as of now, we're gonna cut white as best as we can. And in this pack, pick 8. White is drawing up. There's nothing else to pick. Dark Deal is not playable. Pelaka Predation is really, really weak, so I don't really want to pick this and try to go black-white. We might pick the Ingenious Cab, but in blue-white we will not have a lot of instant and sorceries or non-creature spells to trigger prowess, so this is really filler. I might as well pick a Leaf Crown Dryad. If I happen to go white-green, Leaf Crown Dryad is a playable spell since it's a creature that also doubles as a bestow, as an aura to trigger our Phalanx Leaders. Now we're not seeing a lot of blue outside of the Thunderclap Wyvern. I would really like to go blue-white, but obviously the colors have to be passed to us. Loduzai Mystics is a filler level card, except if we go white-green specifically. It does return an enchantment card, but we don't have those many enchantments. At this point, I might pick Supernatural Stamina. If we happen to go white-black, this is a black trick that also triggers Phalanx Leader, so it might be acceptable. Now, this is a really good card. It might be a really good card in blue-white, since we will have a lot of cheap spells. We don't have those as of now, but maybe we do in the future. It's a 4/4 flyer for 3 that you can cast on turn 4, on turn 5. and it's a 5/5 with a wyvern. It's either this or the cruel revival. Maybe black is a little, it's a tad more open than blue, but I will try and maybe make blue work. No, arena gods quickly uh, say no to me, and now we have to take a Stabund. I guess it's either Stabund or cruel revival. We need to take a black removal now. Maybe we're gunning towards Orzhov here. We don't have zombies as of now, so I will take Stab Wound and see what happens. This could be playable in white blue, and yeah, black does seem fairly open. So now, which is best? Probably this. Extort is a black and white ability, so in black and white, you will always have, yeah, black white is wide open. We should definitely go there. Now Stasis Snare is a phenomenal card, really happy to pick it here. It's a flash Oblivion Ring for 3 mana. Other consideration on Nantuko Husk is really good in black white, as I said in pack 1. Maybe it does wheel, maybe it does not. I really hope we can get our hands on one copy of Nantuko Husk. It would be really good for this deck. The rares are not playable, as Legion Loyalist does close to nothing, Sire Insanity does close to nothing, do not consider those. We will pick this, and maybe we'll Compulsory Rest, which is maybe a playable card in our deck, who knows. Let's see, let's find out. And now, what do we have here? A lot of choices. So, what are we trying to do in our deck? Maybe it might be black white mid range. If so, we just picked the best card out of the pack. Obnixious Cruelty. This card will bolster our removal count to an absurd amount because we already have a Stasis Snare, a Cruelty, Stab Wound, and double Kabira Takedown. So we may take this Cruelty and never care about removals anymore in the whole in the rest of the draft. Otherwise, we might pick Hopeful Eidolon, which is fine. It does trigger Heroic for the hero and the Phalanx leader, but we will find ways to trigger Heroic. I want to have my removals pinned down. And now it's an easy Hopeful Eidolon. What I said before stays true in pack 2, pick 3. This deck is shaping up to be a fine deck. There's also Sigil Shelter, but I already have 2 modal double-faced cards, so I don't wanna amass those. They are a tapland after all, so they do come at a price. You don't want to play many of those. So Hopeful Eidolon, I will put this on 4. Now obviously blue is open in this direction. Nibbles of Frost is a phenomenal card. It's a 3/3 flying prowess creature for 4. Whenever you cast an instant sorcery spell, you freeze a creature, one of your opponent's creature, for a turn. It's really good. There's Stab Wound, but I think for us, Knightly Valor number 1 is better than Stab Wound number 2, because we're pretty set up on removals. I want creatures and ways to trigger Heroic, and Knightly Valor does a double duty on this, being a 2/2 Vigilance Knight creature token, and also an aura to bestow on one of our cheap creatures. So Knightly Valor it is, and now it's clearly Hero by Roaz. I don't really know. Cartel Aristocrat is a phenomenal card. It's a golden common in our color pair. We don't have a lot of sacrifice fodder as of now to turn this. This is basically a true name Nemesis. It's a 2/2 creature for 2 that is protected from everything in Orzhov because you almost always have extra bodies lying around, mainly due to Afterlife. So you have flying spirit creature tokens lying around. It's definitely more of what Orzhov wants to do as an identity, for its identity as a color pair, more than Hero Veroaz. Maybe Hero Veroaz is the better card in a vacuum, but for what we do want to do, Cartel Aristocrat is better. And now we pick Undead Butler, which is definitely what this deck wants to do. For 2 mana, you have a 1/2 that when it enters, it mills 3 cards. When it dies, you may raise that. You can put your target creature card from a graveyard to your hand. So it's the best sacrifice fodder available, probably the best sacrifice fodder available for Cartel Aristocrat, and maybe Nantuko Husk effects. Now, notably, Crush of Tentacles is a phenomenal card, but now we solidified ourselves in white black. So we are seeing a lot of great blue cards. We have to be deaf to the siren's call. We have to be diligent and stick to our plan, which is black white cheap creatures. Now there is an urge of Guildgate. Yes, I want to have access to fixing since I have double costs in white. I don't have double costs in black yet. I don't plan on having any. Except except Night Howler is the exception. This card is phenomenal. It's an enchanted creature that gets +X where X is number of creature cards in all graveyards, both yours and your opponent's. So it's perfect in the strategy. It's also a bestow creatures. It does target heroic. Notice how many times I'm stressing this. Also notice how red is not available at all in this draft. We haven't seen any red. People are amassing red cards because red has been figured out to be the best color in this draft format in the metagame. So people have adjusted accordingly. And now we have red decks flying everywhere. And now we have blue, black cards, white, blue, green, and not a single red card on site. This card is filler, Syndicate Messenger, but it might be playable in this deck. This is also fillable, but it might be playable since we now have 5 enchantments, and now we have 6 thanks to this stab wound. And the deck is basically finished with a pack to spare. And this is a almighty fine deck. I don't have anything to say against this. It's not broken per se, but it's fine. It's what Orzhov wants to do. Maybe we want another Nantuko Husk. We want the little skeleton that could. The 1/2 that you can get back from a graveyard for 3 mana. That would be really good. We also open a mythic. Please, as a PSA, do not include 9 drops in your deck. Yes, you can't even. Yes, this card's a meme. Yes, it's laughable. You cast this card, you say to your opponent, oh, you can't even, blah, 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 and such. No, don't do this. What else do we have here? We have Oath of Liliana, which is an edict for 3 mana. Our removal compartment is phenomenal in this deck. We probably don't want any more removals. This is pretty clearly a Lifebane Zombie, which is a 3/1 Intimidate for 3. Intimidate meaning that it cannot be blocked except for by black and or artifact creatures. And when it does enter, you Thoughtseize your opponent and you seize a green or white creature card. So it randomly hates white and green decks, which is fine to have. The baselines is 3/1 difficult to block creatures, which is definitely good. Now we have a choice between Cruel Revival, which is 5 mana murder that returns up to 1 target zombie creature from your graveyard. We have 3 zombies. We have Lifebane Zombie, Nantuko Husk, and Undead Bugler. But Bugler does exile itself from the graveyard. Now, this pick is a clear Ardenvale Tactician, since it's a fine common that also triggers Heroic on the leader. I'm really stressing the leader part, since leader is a really good card, but it does need to be enabled. So you always have to make sure to have it enabled and to pick cards accordingly, having this in mind. Now we have nothing for us. We have Devour Flesh. It's the only playable card in our color combination, but it's not a card I want. It's not a premium removal, and I'm already chock full of premium removals. I have double Stab Wound, double Oblixilus Cruelty, Stasis Snare. I don't want anything else. So I will pick this just for fun. I will put this in my sideboard, but I will not play Devour Flesh. I will definitely play another Ardenvale Tactician, but maybe, just maybe, it's an Imperious Oligarch. It's pack 3, pick 4. This card could wheel, but by the time it wheels, it will be pick 12. So it's not unreasonable that even if no one is going in black white at the table, someone picks this uh, just because there's nothing else in the pack. Just to say, I want to cut this from the draft table. People tend to do this, so I think I will pick this, even if this has a chance to table to wheel, and this does not. But the second oligarch is better than the second ardent tactician. You also have to keep this in mind. Those kind of considerations when you choose what to pick. Now, Black Bloom Rogue is a fine card. It's a swamp that also doubles as a creature, but the creature part is not something truly exciting. So I think we'll pick an Evolving Wilds here. I will bolster my my mana base since it's kind of lacking as of now. I have no duels. I needed to pass an Orzhov Guildgate to take this Night Owler because I think Night Owler is phenomenal in this deck. And now speaking of passing Orzhov Guildgate to pick phenomenal cards, this card is really good. This card is really good in this deck, but this card is phenomenal. For 3 mana, you get a 3/2 Death Touch. When it does enter, if you sacrifice a creature via exploiting, you get to draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. It also says target player, so if your opponent is a 2, you may target your opponent and have them draw 2 cards and lose the game accordingly. Now we will pick a Blood Scrivener. As you might have seen, this deck is really low to the ground. We have mono 2 drops, so Blood Scrivener, it gets better the lower your curve is. If your curve is really low, you get to dump your hand onto the board, and you get to draw extra cards some turns earlier, as opposed to other decks that have access to 5 and 6 drops, and maybe they're slower, and you don't get to trigger Blood Scrivener as consistently. Now we will pick another Lotus Eye Mystics. I'm not gonna play this. Maybe I will play the third Basilica's creature, but probably not. 2 are just fine. This card is fine in this deck. I will play 2. I am not playing 2 Basilica's creatures all that often in my decks, but since Exploit, and I will play Sanitarium Skeleton though, this card is phenomenal in this deck. It's a Sacrifice Fodder that goes back to your hand over and over again, so you get to sacrifice it on the Fell Stingers, on the Nantuko Husks, on the Cartel Aristocrats of this world. And also it does trigger extort. I was talking about the extort, and it does trigger extort over and over again. And this did wheel. I'm pretty happy about it. And now we also get to pick the third Imperious Oligarch. Black White was wide open in the seat. So we ended up with a really good deck, despite not having any rares, like at all. Like I think we don't have any rares or mythics, if I'm not mistaken. No, we do have the Lifebane Zombie. Ah, also Night White Orchid. Yes, but those are not bombs by any stretch of imagination. Those are just good cards. Like, you would not be surprised if those were uncommons. As a matter of fact, Night Owler is probably better. This was rare in the original Theros. So, for this deck, we have to make a lot of cuts. As of now, we have 17 plus 3 is 20 lands. I want to play 17 in this deck, so it's 14 actual lands and 3 modal double face cards. So I will cut 1 swamp and 1 plains, and then I would like to play 1 more white source as opposed to black. So if I cut this, I will have a 7, 8, 9, 10, and 6, 7, 8. Is that fine? Maybe 9 and 9 is better. 9 plains and 9 white sources, 9 black sources. Maybe playing 6, 15 plus 3 is better. Yeah, This has to be better. 7, 8, 9, 10. 7, 8, 9. Yes, this is the mana base. So we have to make 7 cuts. Do I want anything out of the sideboard? No, definitely not. So let's split the deck into creatures and non-creatures. What do I want for sure? What may I cut? Tormented Hero is fine-ish. I don't want Supernatural Stamina for sure. Maybe the second Stab Wound. If I'm cutting on enchantments, then I don't want the Lotus Eye Mystics. Because I only have access to one, two, three, four enchanters, but like not a lot of those goes to the graveyard. Does not, so it's only ever good if we pick the Night Owl back up. We might cut Syndicate Messenger. This is a filler. We have our Afterlife token generation covered by the Imperious Oligarch. This is the kind of deck that we want to go really low to the ground. So good quality 2 drops at the premium instead of 3 drops. This is the point I'm trying to make. Now, do I want to play Nightly Valor? One Nightly Valor is fine, but it's a 5 drop on in a deck that curves out of 4. Maybe if we cut Nightly Valor, we can cut a land. But I don't really want to play less than 9 sources of either white white or black mana. So that's why I really want to play 15 lands plus 3 modal double faced cards. So what am I cutting out of here? It's not clear. Sanitarium Skeletons are really good, but do I want a second? I will probably just cut this Tormented Hero. And what about the 2s? So this will play, yes. Maybe not. Like, do I really want Knight of the White Orchid? It's just a 2/2 for striker that searches your library for a plains card if you are at a disadvantage in land jobs. But do I really have a way to capitalize on one extra plane? And the answer is not. Like this is really low to the ground. Like only the only benefit of having extra lands, apart from casting our only 5 drop, which I may or may not cut, is having extra mana to extort, and maybe extra mana to return your Sanitarium Skeletons more time than usual. I think I will cut the Knight of the White Orchid. Our deck is pretty tight as it is. We don't really need another double white colored card when we already have a pretty stringent color requirement in our cards. Now, Blood Screen is a card I want, and the Butler, yes, Carter Aristocrat, Imperious Oligarch, yes, this is definitely, I want every one of these of this card. Maybe I'm just cutting Nightly Valor. How many ways do I have to trigger Heroic? We don't have a lot. Like, we just have the 2 Ardomil Tactician, the Nightly Valor, and these 2 bestow creatures, and that's it. So Phalanx Leader isn't even that good. Like I have to target the Phalanx Leader with my own removals in order to trigger it. What if Phalanx Leader was the cut all this time around? Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ways to trigger heroic. That's not a lot. Like this is just a 1/1 that maybe puts one batch of counters on all of your creatures, and that's it. That's not all that great. Phalanx Leader is a phenomenal card in Boros, but it is not in this one. Like, what is this deck trying to accomplish? This deck is trying to spam the board with replaceable creatures and capitalize on having an unblockable Cartel Aristocrat, an unblockable Lifebane Zombie, unblockable damage out of a Stab Wound, a gigantic Nantuko Husk, and such, and drawing extra card with Fellstinger. We might cut both Phalanx Leader and Nightly Valor, to be fair, and probably like adding another Stab Wound. and having a stubborn carry our game plan, it might be a possibility. To be fair, now that I don't have the double white, now that I don't have the double white of Phalanx Leader, maybe I can even cut a land. So 7, 8, 9, 10, 7, 8, 9. So I cut a plains. They play 9 sources of both with 3 modal double faced cards, and we add a 1 drop. Is this the joke? Is it better? 19 creatures? I think this is the correct configuration for this deck. I like this that much more. So this is the configuration I will play this with. So let's go forth. Let's play the first game. If you bear with me up until now, I will I will say thank you if you liked my explanations in the draft portion of the game. Please, if you want, like this video and subscribe to my channel. That will help us grow and produce more content in the upcoming days. This end is not that phenomenal, and our basilisk creature is getting snap removed. We might play the if only this card showed up one turn earlier, we might have dunked on the Warfare. The Warfare is really a mediocre card, also because of cards like this. What am I doing here? Do I want to extract all of my value out of the Ardenvale Tactician? Or do I just slam it as a 2-3 flyer, but then I expose this to the Devour Flesh as well? I really don't want to play this card as a land as of now, since it doesn't help me play any other spells. I think we'll go this into this. It might be wrong, but it's not all that probable that my opponent has another Devour Flesh to make this a terrible choice as opposed to play the Imperious Oligarch and be kind of Devour Flesh immune. So what is my opponent doing for 3 mana? Playing another Devour Flesh, immediately ridiculizing me for my choice. Now we'll play the Oligarch, and I feel very bad for this. And our hand has been picked apart. And if my opponent draws a spell out of this, I will feel extra sad. I'm not able to cast this Lifebane Zombie. This end is really developing really not all that well. We are under a bus against our opponent with 6 cards in hand, playing blue-black control. I don't really know how to win this game. I'm not playing Obnixious Cruelty on a 1/4. Oath of Jace, yes. Orzhov really does tend to fold to Carjo spells because all we can cast is removals, creatures and removals, but all of those cards are 1/1s. So if my opponent generates card advantage, so if my opponent for example casts a treasure cruise next turn, we might as well just straight up scoop the game. Now, am I playing this at 2/3, or am I playing this as a land? I mean, this card becomes a 5/3 creature, a menace creature, if my opponent has 8 cards in the graveyard. So we really need my opponent not to play a treasure cruise. Really, because treasure cruise would delve the whole graveyard and make this card just a 2/3, like basically forever. Yeah, Oath of Jace triggers, but it does nothing because all it does is cry X, where X is the number of planeswalkers you control. I don't put my opponent on casting planeswalkers. I do put my opponent on destroying my 2/3 menace creatures. Is this a treasure cruise? Or is this a Gurmag Angler? I can defeat Gurmag Angler. I cannot defeat, for the love of anything, Treasure Cruise. So, opponent, what are you trying to do? Maybe my opponent would have cast a Treasure Cruise last turn, and my opponent had it, but my opponent does not. I draw a Sanitarium Skeleton that does nothing. It does something in the form of now I can Kabira take down the 2/3, But if my opponent triggers prowess, this becomes a 3-4, and so I will be really sad to throw this card away. I can just play this and pass, play safe for a turn. My opponent is at 20. I'm not really missing 2 points of damage, of menace damage, so I'm just gonna pass, see what my opponent does, and maybe if my opponent goes tapped out for something, I can Kabira takedown the 2-3. It's really sad that I couldn't deploy this 3-1 intimidate creature up until now, but you got to do what you got to do. Now, with prowess on the stack, we're gonna kill this card. If my opponent has consider, we lose on the spot, but you got to do what you got to do, and my opponent has medium skin, which at the very least, it's not it's not considered. So my opponent doesn't get to protect the Ingenious Cab for free. My opponent needed to spend a whole card to protect it, so it's totally fine. Also because the eighth card has gone to the graveyard. This card is a 5/3 menace creature. So what are we gonna do right now? Probably just attack with a rogue for 5. My opponent goes to 15, and then play Obnixious Cruelty at sorcerer speed on the Ingenious Cab, so that my opponent doesn't get the chance to untap and play any instant speed spell to protect the Ingenious Cab. Now, Bident of Thassa is a phenomenal card. It basically says every time the Nimbus Naiad attacks, connects, and deals 2 damage to me, my opponent gets to draw a card. Luckily for me, I have another instant speed removal, so Nimbus Naiad will not get a chance to connect unless my opponent has another medium skin, and that would be really unfortunate. We'll basically probably lose the game on the spot. There are a lot of times in this game that I have said this specific and particular phrase. Now, my opponent will activate the Bident. The other effect of the Bident, I'm not gonna point on it because my opponent would read the card, but my opponent is already reading the card. The other effect is whenever you tap it for 2 mana, your opponent's creatures need to attack this turn if able. So I will lose this 2/1 Vigilance creature to the 1/4, and that is really, really unfortunate, but it is what it is. My opponent does not activate the Bident though, for some reason, and I'm really happy for this, because I will just attack for 5, play Swamp, play the Lifebane Zombie. I will put my opponent on having a land in hand, and or maybe a counter. My opponent has an Essence Scatter in hand. I mean, I'm not really banking on this Lifebane Zombie to win the game. If it does resolve, fine. What do you have in hand, opponent? It is a Possessed Cab, which is really, really bad for me. Because what does this card do is getting back the Nimbus Naiad from my opponent's graveyard. So, but my opponent has 7 mana, so this turn is not gonna do all that much. But it top decked, snapped the top deck the removal, which is clutch for my opponent, because otherwise I would have won. I probably would have won this game. But I pick an Undead Butler, which is good. I will snap go to combat. Does my opponent activate the Bident? Now my opponent does. I am forced to lose my Imperious Oligarch because Bident of Thassa is that good of a card. But it is what it is. My opponent goes to 6. I will make a flyer. I will play an Undead Butler. So I have a blocker. I have 2 blockers. As a matter of fact, if my opponent attacks with a Phalagi Archaeologist, and if my opponent does kill the Butler, I will probably just pick an Ardenvale Tactician. My opponent is probably gonna grab a removal, yeah, for the Lifebane Zombie, and then go land and removal on the zombie. Does my opponent do it? Yes, no? Lifebane Zombie has Intimidate, so it cannot get blocked by black and or artifact creatures, so Possessed Cab will act as a removal for it, and that's fine. I pick a Sanitarium Skeleton that does the nothing as of now. My opponent does not activate the Bident, so I do have a choice whether to attack with the life-bane zombie or not. Do I offer the trade for the possessed cub? Probably. It has to be, but then if I draw removal, it just get worse. Notably, if I draw a stab wound, I will basically win on the spot because I put a stab wound on the 1/4. I mean, this is one less creature on the board, so my opponent gets less chances to trigger the Bident. So I might be interested in this. Yes, of course. But even if I top deck removal, my opponent is gonna play Omnixious Cruelty on something else. So uh, maybe this way my opponent trades the Lifebane Zombie and then plays removal on the flyer. Does my opponent feel threatened by the flyer? Did I need to attack with the 1/2s now in order to push one more damage? The opponent Snap plays Anchor to the Ether on the token. That's fine. And then my opponent plays Omnixious Cruelty on the Butler. Alright. I mean, this is kind of a spew out of my opponent's part. Hopeful Eidolon does nothing, unfortunately for me. It's possible uh, I just slow roll this in hand. What is this Hopeful Eidolon do for me? Nothing as of now. I mean, if I draw another Screecher, it could trigger Extort and put my opponent to 4. If I bestow the Eidolon, I couldn't even attack since my opponent will attack me for 1 and draw an extra card with Binding of Tassa, and my opponent would draw more removals. I don't really want to get out Biden in this deck. Yeah, so what am I doing? Am I bestowing this on the skeleton anyways? I think I can wait a turn and see what happens. Maybe play this as a surprise. I mean, it's doing nothing as of now. I really need my opponent to draw lands and not to draw um, removals. Now, if my opponent now what can I do is go to combat. If my opponent activates the Bident, I'm forced to attack with both the skeletons. And what I can do is just play this Eidolon to negate a draw for my opponent. So if my opponent attacks, I can chump and then put my opponent to 2. But this game gets completely dominated by the Bident. Unfortunately, since my opponent, unfortunately for me, topped the 2 removals back to back on a row, and we drew a couple more lands that I wished we had. So what am I doing with this Eidolon? Am I really playing it as a chumper? I mean, it's not gonna get any better than this unless I draw a Basilisk creature, a creature with extort, and extort this Eidolon with it. My opponent is playing an Obnix's Cruelty on the Hopeful Eidolon, which is a complete spew. This is a third Obnix's Cruelty. Basically, what my opponent did is just cycling the Cruelty, which is just unreasonable, totally unreasonable on my opponent's part. Uh, as I draw another land, which is really frustrating. But it is what it is. Do I attack? Do I not? I definitely don't. I play a land and pass. I don't want you to draw extra cards. Yeah, you missed your spot, opponent. You definitely missed your spot. Can I draw a stab wound and win the game? No, I draw another blank yet again. Really, really unfortunate. Really, really frustrating. 2 cards and win on the spot. Come on. It does get frustrating when you draw bad and you see your opponent making mistakes that should concede the game to you. You should definitely win the game when those mistakes happen, but my opponent seem not to get punished for those. As he draws 2 more cards. Now, I think this is the final nail on the coffin. my opponent goes back up to 5 cards in hand, and we basically can concede the game. My opponent also plays a basically a creature, so my opponent will also start extorting and go back up to a comfortable life total. So those two win on basically almost, they would have won on the spot a couple turns earlier. Now it's a little late. Even if I play Stab Wound on the 1/4, my opponent will just play a removal on their own creature and not be affected by the drain part of the Stab Wound. I don't really know what to draw. Maybe Fell Stinger into something else. So I need to play my lands because I really need to draw. Nantuko Husk is fine. What does Nantuko Husk do is uh, making me attack with both Sanitarium Skeletons. My opponent will block and fall to 3. That's fine. Now, what I can do if this Nantuko Husk does resolve, my opponent has a counter, we are royally screwed. But if my opponent does not, we can sacrifice a skeleton and redeploy it on defense. That's something we can do. This way we pushed 1 damage and had the blocker nonetheless. Now my opponent can only attack with a bat, and that's it. Because otherwise I will go block and sacrifice the skeleton on the Nantuko Husk. Also, my opponent needs to respect the Nantuko Husk. Also, my opponent is kind of finishing the cards in the library. Now, notably, Bident of Thassa, it's not mandatory. My opponent can just decline to take the draw, so my opponent will not draw themselves to a mill loss. But Shipbreaker Kraken is definitely a good card. It's a 6/6 for 6 with 8 more mana, becomes a 10/10 and taps 4 target creatures for 2 turns. So either we draw a removal right now or we basically lose the game. Now we can trade the Nantuko Husk for it. If my opponent forces me to trade, this card is horrible in the spot. Yes, we are the aggro. We were not supposed to get to this stage of the game. Unfortunately, we did. And I don't think there's anything I can do. Like I need to attack with an Nantuko Husk, but still it's not enough unless my opponent decides to willingly block with a Kraken. Now there's nothing I can do in this position. In this position, I should just resign since my opponent will untap, go monstrous with the Kraken, tap all of my board, and attack with lethal. So I might as well sacrifice the skeleton just because, just to remove one of my opponent's blockers. Maybe my opponent plays around removal. I don't know. We will make our opponent go through the motion. As a general advice, let your opponent go through the motions, because your opponent can just miss something that you may or may not have noticed. So it's always a solid game plan to try and fish and hope for your opponent to make a crucial mistake. And in this case, my opponent does not, unfortunately for me, and this spells doom for me. I think I will go to 2. So if my opponent attacks with everything, my opponent attacks just with the Kraken. I can chum block the Kraken, and going to 4 is different than going to 2, to be fair. Now, if I happen to top deck a Screecher, maybe I can do something, because I do have the skeletons on defense for the Kraken. So I will probably not lose next turn. Now, notably, my opponent is a creature, so my opponent just needs to cast four spells in order to win the game, and extort four times. Now, what I am doing here is sacrifice this other skeleton, then get it back, and doing this dance once again. Sanitarium skeletons are good at not losing the game. Does my opponent have a counter? Did my opponent draw the essence scatter now? I mean, my hand is forced, so yes, my opponent did draw the essence scatter, but missteps, so it's not my opponent is not able to drain me for one with extort. I will play the planes just in case I get to survive one more turn. So maybe I can draw two cards with the Scrivener. But I mean, I am at four. Maybe my opponent casts a Treasure Cruise and lose the game. That would be clutch. No, it's a Soul Flayer. It's a Soul Flayer that gets flying, I guess. No, it's just a 4/4/4/4. That's fine-ish. What did my opponent... Oh, my opponent didn't delve anything. Yeah, oops. Yeah, you could have delved a flying creatures to give Soul Flayer flying. If a creature with flying was exiled with Soul Flayer's delve ability, and does the same for each and every keyword possible. So my opponent is doing nothing right now. Uh, so do my creature get to untap? These creatures don't untap during their controls. Untap for as long as you control the Shipbreaker Kraken. I thought it was only for a turn, so it's forever. This card is ridiculous. So I go to two, I draw two cards that do nothing. I will play them both, but I mean, I'll just die due to the extort triggers. As a matter of fact, my opponent will just play Essence Scatter. Now I will confide on my opponent's ability to find the lethal by attacking with this creature, and I will just concede the game. Really, really unfortunate game. I think we played it to our best, but it does require this deck does require to be helped by the top of the deck. Uh, there's been a lot of turns where we could have top decked a couple cards to win the game on the spot, notably those stab wounds, or my opponent to fail on drawing a removal spell, but my opponent did not, and so we are 0-0-1. I was just checking the deck if we needed to make some adjustments, some cuts, and some includes. But I think our loss was attributed to just an unfortunate draw. So there's not a lot of conclusions to be drawn out of this particular game. Um, um, you need to get lucky in Magic. You can have the best of the draft decks and still go 0-3. You can have a mediocre deck and go 7-X. So the only thing you can do, the only field, or the only way you can exert your power on in a Magic game is the choices you make in game, and you winning or losing doesn't entirely depend on this. Now we will play the Cartel Aristocrat since it's the best 2-drop we can play. Zurgo is a 2/2 that can block creatures with power 2 or greater, so it's basically a 2/2 that can only attack. And don't really feel threatened by Zurgo. We went 1-drop into 2-drop, so we might be able to out aggro my opponent. I could block with the Cartel Aristocrat and sacrifice the Tormented Hero, but if my opponent has removal in response, Notably, a Devour Flesh, we would lose the game on the spot, and I'm not offering the trade with Cartel Aristocrat without giving the Aristocrat protection. That is not on the in the cards. It's not on the table. Now, Blood Tithe Harvester is a phenomenal card. It's a 3/2. It's the main reason to go Rakdos. Rakdos being red-black. Whenever it enters, it creates a blood token, and then you can sacrifice to give negative X to target creature with X number of blood tokens. So you can sacrifice this to give a creature -2, -2. I think I will just remove the harvester from the board and try to outrace my opponent. If I draw planes, we can stasis snare my opponent's next creature, as my opponent is trying to race me with Zurgo. And now the Gear Crafter is really good in this spot, since the Thopter blocks the hero and the Gear Crafter blocks the aristocrat. So what do I need to do in order to create an imbalance in this position? I could attack with the aristocrat, basically offering a trade with for the gear crafter for my tormented hero. There's no way for me to be mana efficient this turn. I really would have liked a fourth land to go maybe Tactician into Blood Scrivener. I could Fell Stinger, but Fell Stinger loses me life. So then I would need to play defensive on this board, which is something I could do. And maybe it's the best thing I can do in this position. So play the Fell Stinger, exploit the tormented hero, and draw, and then we play defensive. We stay back for a turn. Unfortunately, I draw planes. I would have really liked to draw to have a black mana open to deploy this. To have a free sacrifice fodder for my Cartel Aristocrat, but I will deploy this next turn. I crucially drew the second white source to deploy my Stasis Snare, which is good. Now, what I can do is go block and sacrifice the Fell Stinger on the aristocrat. Unfortunately, then my opponent could play Devour Flesh, and I would really struggle on that position. I think I take everything and go to 9 and see what does my opponent do, because I will attack my opponent to 9 and then deploy my cheap creatures to block. Like a Sanitarium Skeleton totally blanks the Gear Crafter as my opponent plays another Gear Crafter. My opponent is getting really aggressive with their jaws, unfortunately for me. So we will play this and attack. But this game is shaping up to be a lost cause. Yeah, my opponent will just trade the stinger for the gear crafter. Yeah, this is terrible for me. This is just terrible for me. So I will play this, and Tactician is a creature and pass. My opponent will obviously have a removal for the Tactician, and we'll just lose the game accordingly. So what went bad in this game? It went bad my inability to double spell on crucial turns, and the power of the gear crafter producing 2 blockers at a time and 2 attackers at a time completely destroyed my offensive and my defensive capabilities. We are 3 lives behind and 1 attack behind. Luckily for me, my opponent spends 2 mana to only add 1 power to the board, so maybe that could be fine for me. My opponent plays another Witch's Mark, that's fine. I will probably just chump with the Skeleton and then play Stasis Snare on the Zurgo. Problem is, I will definitely need to chump something. I take 4 damage. Problem is, My opponent also has Rimrock Knight. Yeah, that is just a lost cause. This draft has been a lost cause from the very beginning. What am I supposed to do now? I can play the Oligarch, and definitely probably just need to drop a stasis near on the Zurgo. Problem is both of those wicked aura roll token have me lose one life when they get put into the graveyard. And if I stasis near the Zurgo, the aura token still goes to the graveyard. So my opponent still gets to ping me for one. So I am at a 3 right now. I really needed the Basilica's creatures that I didn't get to draw this game, and that was really unfortunate. I really don't know what to do. If I play this, then I cannot play Stasis Near. So I need to play the Scrivener and try to go to blockers with that, but then I fall to 4 with the top tap token, and all of this while my opponent has the rogue's passage that gives unblockable to one of their creatures. So if I go to 2, then each and any one of their creatures becomes lethal if they spend a turn activating the rogue's passage. So I don't see any ways to get out of this. Fellstinger is a phenomenon. It's an incredible card. Had I drawn this card the last game against blue black and generate some advantage against red black with this nut of a start, becomes incredibly worse. So I'm sacrificing this to give my card aristocrat protection from red. Yes, my opponent is prevented. My opponent also goblin heel cut. My opponent just does everything, and all right. When your opponent draws like this, the only thing that you can say is congratulations, mm, congratulations. There's nothing else that you can do. This is a platinum opponent. So all right, we fall to 0 and 2. And I still don't really think it's a problem of our deck. It's a problem of we flatted out against blue black, and my black red opponent had the nut the start of their deck. So it really is not speaking volumes about our deck incapability of winning games as much as an unfortunate series of events uh, put us in a 0 and 2 pit, in the 0 and 2 hole. So we are almost out of this draft, but not entirely out of this draft. We are almost, but not entirely. We can still try and claw out our path to a winning record. I will try to do my best in this sense. This is a 4 land hand. It's not all that great, but at the very least we are covered against Devour Flesh now, which is fine. Since we got destroyed by it in game one, and that was just due to an unfortunate coincidence, since, as I said multiple times, Devour Flesh is really not that reliable of a removal spell in this format, so I really don't pick it highly. As a matter of fact, I do have one copy and it's chilling in my sideboard, since it's not the removal I do want to have in my deck. A Stab Wound is more of the kind of removals I want to add to my black-white sacrifice deck, and we would have won game one had I drawn one of my 2 copies of a Stab Wound. Now, it might be a game plan in this hand. Maybe I can deal like 2 to 4 damage with Oligarch and play Stab Wound on one of my opponent's creatures. Maybe my opponent is playing blue. Blue tends to have a high toughness creatures. So we Stab Wound one of my opponent's creatures, and this could become a legit win condition, dealing upwards to 10, 12, 14 life. The damages to my opponent, unblockable damages to my opponent. As my opponent is trying to figure out what to do with their life, maybe they have a connection issue, that's probably it. Or they just took a trip to the bathroom and they're making us wait. They're making us and our Felidar guardian wait. for my opponent. And my opponent did Maul. So, but taking a mulligan is really not that hindering in this draft, in this limited meta game, since now what is hindering is drawing your one drop in awkward spots. It did happen game one. What is my opponent playing? A foundation stack? Ooh, Fell Stinger was a phenomenal draw in this position. My opponent is gonna take two, and then I'm gonna upgrade my Imperious Oligarch to a 1/1 flyer. This is the kind of spot where Felstinger gets to shine, and not against Arachdos aggro. But now we really adjusted our draw. My opponent deploys another Voyaging Satyr. It's not all that convincing. Hopefully, Eidolon is not that convincing in this deck. I probably should cut this card. Had a more powerful standalone card in game one, maybe I could have won that one specifically. Now, what we are gonna try to do, I could bestow this like on the Fell Stinger, or I could just bestow it on the Flyer. I think it's the only way to occupy all of our mana this turn, because I only have a single black, so I cannot double spell in any way, shape, or form. I'm just deciding whether to put the bestowed Eidolon on my ground creature or my flying creature. And I think the flying creature is becomes a threat, a real threat, if I make it a 2/2 as opposed to a 1/1. It does goldfish my opponent faster, so I'm gonna do it. And next turn we have a plethora of removals to play on whatever dumb green creature my opponent plays. I will still attack my opponent. Maybe my opponent has a Boon Satyr on bestowed on one of their voyaging ones, but my opponent does nothing, which is fine. I will just play an Antuco Husk and pass. My opponent just had an unfortunate draw, missed the second color, and ramped into nothing. My opponent probably has 4, 5, and 6 drops in another color. If I take a wild guess, it could be red, it could be blue, but alas, this was not really a game. As I said before, the strength, the relative strength of a deck goes beyond what your record is, and mainly because of this kind of games, where yes, we have won a game, but the game really uh, told us nothing about our deck strength, since we won, I guess, nothing. Now, speaking of this hand is fine. Do I play Kabira Takedown as a land? We'll see. We'll make the decision basing it upon what we draw the very first turn. So, based on what is our first draw and what my opponent plays on their first turn. My opponent molds to 6. And let's see. Does my opponent have a mountain, as anyone else does these days? Everyone is so excited to play mountains in this format. Mountains excite people. Do you get excited to play mountains as well? Not joking. I might just play this Kabira Takedown. Yeah, it does give us a double white for the Ardmail Tactician on turn 3. And my opponent is playing Boros. How surprising! Please, everyone, act surprised. Wow, how does my opponent do it? No one is playing Boros these days. More like everyone is playing Boros these days. So, land, attack you for 3, Witch's Mark, yeah, yeah. It still dies to stab wound, so it's fine. It will deal a lot of damage on its way out, but and by a lot I mean 5. It's a full, it's a full lava axe to the face. But my opponent did not have a wild slash for our Basilicus creature, and gaining life will prove to be crucial this game. So stab wound your creature, fall back down to 15, thanks to the wicked aura token. And then what will my opponent play? Can my opponent give me a break? Yes, my opponent did. Now I can just play the Tactician and Extort. I can also just play the Night Owler as a bestowed creature and turn the Basilicus creature into a 3/4. But then that puts a target on this creature's back. Whereas I really want to extort my opponent a couple of times in order to catch back on lives. So this is the time where extort is a good idea. Generally, extorting in the early phases of a game is not a bright idea since you're losing on tempo. But against Boros specifically, spending this extra mana to drain one life could be crucial some turns down the line. Also, deploying another creature as opposed to growing one of my one the only one that is on the battlefield is good for Kabira takedown purposes. Now, I don't have Kabira Takedown open. My opponent is gonna turn the Sangre's Pegasus into a 2/3 life blinker. If my opponent does attack with the Sangre's Pegasus, I get the clear indication that my opponent is a Rimrock Knight, but my opponent does not. My opponent just is a Boulder Salvo. So my opponent clears the blocker, attacks for 2, but now I can do something really good, and by something really good, I mean I cannot take my creature down with Kabira Takedown, so how am I gonna do this? We could just play the Night Owler and pass, and if my opponent is removal for this creature, so be it. Then I will find some other ways to take down the Pegasus. And do I trade 5 damages for 2 lifelink ones? Go 1 life positive on the exchange, but we put both our life total down, which is not really what I want, but maybe I do. Maybe the trick against Boros is raising them back. I also have an Ardenvale Tactician, so and I immediately get punished by Scab Clan Berserker, which is a 2/2 ace with Renown. Meaning when an opponent casts a non-creature spell, and by opponent I mean me, I get dealt 2 damage to my face. But I immediately though draw an Awful Eidolon, which is phenomenal in this position. So I will snap, play this card to give lifelink to my Basilicus creature. Doesn't matter if I lose 2 damages, and I will definitely trade now 6 damages on the offensive. I go back to 16. And now, if my opponent doesn't have a removal, the game is basically ended. And no, Goblin Hill Cutter is not doing the trick. The double Goblin Hill Cutter is not doing the trick. But this is a lot of damage. Had I not have top decked an Hopeful Eidolon, I would have definitely lost this game. But lucky me, we get to go back to 11 life. We get to deploy this. We do not extort since I want to play. I want to triple spell this turn. I want to play this, and a Kabira Takedown. Probably on the Sangre's Pegasus. No, I cannot. I need to play this on the Berserker, or I die. This is 10 damages, I think. Go to 9, 3 and 3, 6. So the only way I have to survive... I might also just play takedown on the heel cutter. So I have a blocker and my opponent just yeah. I need to take down this now. Had I played the removal on the Pegasus, I would have died. I got a fall to 9, and this 9 unblockable damage since double eel cutter prevents my creatures from blocking. This is not the only way to survive. I just need to point my removal on one of the two eel cutters or the berserker, and I get to survive. And now the Night Owler pumps my creature back to 7/8, and as a matter of fact, my opponent just cannot attack at all. If my opponent just attacks with a Pegasus, it goes back to 7 and then gets little damage on the swing back. If my opponent attacks both of these, I will just make chump in order to grow my Screecher. My Night Owler, the Screecher. Yes, I will definitely chump with the Skeleton. And now Ardenvale Tactician is just lethal. I can even extort. And this is an attack for a 10. So pretty great. Another game goes in the books. It's funny, I wanted to cut the Awful Eidolon 2 games ago. I still think it's correct to cut this card from this deck. It's only ever good. It's only really good against aggro. This card shines when you have heroic triggers. So when we can bestow this creature, you also get an heroic trigger out of it. You need to have an extra value to justify the inclusion of this card in your deck. As I see it, it's more in this deck specifically, in Hordes of Sacrifice. And yeah, my opponent is stalling, but my opponent definitely lost the game. As I see Awful Eidolon in this deck, in Black-White Sacrifice, it's a sideboard piece against aggressive deck. It obviously shines against the Boros. Awful Eidolon won this game. We would have lost otherwise if not for a Lucky Top deck. But I mean, I'm called the Kami of Lucky Top decks for a reason. This name is not here just for funsies. I am the Kami of Lucky Top decks. Get to manifest the Hopeful Eidolons when they are needed the most. So I still think this is a creature that needs to be cut from this deck, from this specific configuration of the deck. Now in this game it shined, so we are grateful to it. We will go 2-2, which is respectable considering we started 0-2 with this deck. So the goal now is to, at the very least, try to go positive. This was not an 0-3 deck. This was not a 1-3 deck. This is more a 3-3 or a 4-3 deck. So let's try to put this deck in the correct bracket according to its merits. Do we need to make some changes? What does this deck need? Maybe we have too many 3s. Maybe this deck really does need another Basilica's creature, since it seems so quintessential for this deck in order to function. But we may consider our removals as a 4 job. The Night Owler also is a 4 job, since you tend to always bestow this creature and that's it. Tormented Hero didn't really surprise me, and didn't really make me an enthusiastic fan of it. So we might cut this card and maybe add. Do we add the knight? Even if we don't really need the extra planes, just as a 2/2 for striker for 2, maybe it's fine on its own merits. It's a good attacker, it's a good blocker. Yeah, let's try this. Maybe we should have gone with a Knight of the White Orchid to begin with. But it is what it is. This deck really needs to go 3-2. That would be acceptable. 3 and 2 and then 3 and 3 will be fine. I don't think this deck has the possibility to go all the way from an 0 and 2 to a 7 and 2. That is a pipe dream that goes well beyond what this deck can and will do. But one more game, let's reason one more game at a time. As a psychological trick, that's always good. Always reason one game at a time. Just ask you one more. Do I keep this end? Yes, one more. I don't have white mana, but I have a nice curve. Yeah, Blood Scrivener is just a Goblin Piker, a 2-1 for 2 on turn 2. But it's something to attack my opponent with. And one more land, any land, does cast a Lifebane Zombie. As a matter of fact, now we'll just play this as a land in order to play the zombie next turn. Because my opponent revealed green mana. My opponent both played an Hissing Quagmire and a Lumbering Falls, both Sultai manlands. The black-green is a 2/2 Death Toucher for 3 mana. The blue-green one is a 3/3 X-Proof, a green and blue elemental creature. That is really bad for me. What is also really bad is that my opponent revealed 3 creatures with the Butler, and if the Butler dies, my opponent will get back a Possessed Cub, and that would be a disaster for me. Also, Lifebane Zombie gets checked by the Butler, so this is basically just a Thoughtseize for my opponent, and that's it. And we got to hit a Drag Mangler. Notably, this card gets exiled. So my opponent cannot scavenge one of my opponent's creature. Scavenge is bugged, is currently bugged. Um, Arena does not display what does the card do. So if anyone did not play around the Return to Ravnica block and does not know what Scavenge do, it's really interesting that, that they made this decision, this oversight. Now, as my opponent is playing Sultai value and is outvaluing us horribly. So I don't see many paths to win this game. But we did draw a plains. So we can offer this trade. We can stab wound my Felstinger. Actually, stab wound might be a win condition. If opponent draws a land and plays a return center, and we stab wound it, it might be a fine way to win this game. Now, as of now, I will just offer my opponent a trade. I think my opponent will just take it since my opponent is on the defense. No, my opponent does not. So now I could, since my opponent did not block, my opponent intends to attack with the Felstinger. So initially I wanted to play the Cartel Aristocrat, but if my opponent intends to attack with the Felstinger, I really want to play the Oligarch instead, as my voice gets raspier and raspier as the time passes by. I need to get some stamina if I need to do those marathons. Now, my opponent plays another Butler, and that's the reason why my opponent refused to block last turn, because my opponent wants to check the Lifebane Zombie with their own Butler, and that's a really interesting idea. Now, luckily for me, my opponent is missing land drops. We cannot attack. I mean, I can attack with the Oligarch and offer this trade. Maybe it's fine. My opponent will get back probably an X Weaver, but that might be fine. Just clearing the blocker is probably fine enough. And also generating a 1/1 flyer might be interesting in this position. So my opponent does exile the Butler. It will get back the Spider. Yes, everything according to plan. Luckily we drew a Butler in order to double spell this turn 2. We mill 3 lands, and now we play the aristocrat, since the other oligarch does nothing. So just play this and pass. Next turn we have a clear attack with a life-bane zombie. We might also just sacrifice the butler on the aristocrat in order to give the aristocrat protection from black attack with for 2. As my opponent says nice to us, I understand my opponent's salt, since my opponent really built a powerful and synergistic salt-tie blue, black, and green value deck, and is really getting hosed by not drawing lands. So we do untap Sanitarium Skeleton, phenomenal draw. Is it a phenomenal draw? Kind of. I mean, what can I do is just stop wounding the Nyx Weaver in order to attack with everything. And I think that is the what we do now, because my opponent is getting screwed. We really need to apply pressure. Do I also attack with the butler? If my opponent blocks the butler, my opponent takes 3, 5, 6, 7, 8. No, my opponent is definitely chomping something with the weaver. It's definitely the lifebane zombie. So now my opponent just takes 3, 5, and that's fine. I will not attack with the butler. The butler stays back. No, my opponent is trading. My opponent is trading and is not chomping with the weaver. That does mean that my opponent is taking 2 damage from the stab wound. My opponent is better served just chomping. That's fine. Falls back to 12. I play the Sanitarium Skeleton and pass. And now Cartel Aristocrat really will do its best true name Nemesis impression. Also, my opponent just plays Return Center, and our plan of bestowing the stab wound on the Return Center is coming together. That will mean nice. Yes, my opponent is definitely salty. My opponent milled 3 more lands while missing land drops. At the very least, my opponent drew the 4th. We also have 4 lands, so we have the same amount of lands. So I don't really understand all that much the complaint. Do I play another Lifebane Zombie? It's not doing that much, since I'm not really attacking with ground creatures anymore, since my opponent will just get stab wounded. So what do I do now is probably just sacrifice the butler and get back the yes, take the action, get back the oligarch. I don't really need another Lifebane zombie. Give protection from black, attack you for 3. I could stab wound pre-combat and attack with a 2-1 as well, but I don't want my opponent to chump. I want my opponent to take 2 damages, 2 unblockable damages a turn out of stab wound. As if my opponent wants to point a removal to its own center, my opponent loses even faster, and yes, my opponent agrees and concedes the game. This position is unplayable for them. They just missed too many land drops for their own good, and that was really unfortunate. This is the second time in this run that my opponent got unfortunate. We are 3-2. It's also true that the first game against blue-black control we did get unfortunate. So the luck is evening out, as we are at 3-2, which is respectable now as a result. As of now, we would only lose 500 gems, but we got in exchange the possibility to draft a really sweet black-white sacrifice deck in a clear open lane. This is the deck we should have drafted all along. And is this end keepable? Now, this end is missing on the 2. I mean, we do have a 2. We have the Dizzying Swoop, the the Male Tactician adventure, so maybe that could buy us some time if my opponent were to play a 1-drop and attack. My opponent does not. My opponent is starting slow as well, but Iliad Pilgrim is definitely a really good card. It's a 2-for-1 for my opponent. Now, what will I play next turn? What kind of a threat will I deploy? Any threat that I will play will get compulsory rested. My opponent is playing green-white control for some reason. Why my opponent's first play of the game was an Heliod Pilgrim fetching a removal spell of anything. I will play this. Like, this is replaceable. I can replace a Black Bloom Rogue. I cannot replace an Antuco Husk. It's the only one I got. So if you want to pacify one of my creatures, Black Bloom Rogue is the creature you needed to point your removal at. So what will you do? You have 6 cards in hand. And there are a lot of things to do. Another Iliad Pilgrim. Sure. What is this pilgrim getting this time around? A Knightly Valor. A Knightly Valor will be good. I could leave the Stasis Snare open. But if my opponent plays around this, and does not play the Knightly Valor for a turn or two, we go too much behind on tempo. If my opponent plays a Knightly Valor on one of the Pilgrims, yes, my opponent creates a 2-2, but then a stab wound the pilgrim becomes a 1-2 vigilance creature back, and then I just needed to stay back on defense in order to my opponent to get drained from the stab wound. So my question now is, do I attack? Yes, no, I can stay on defense. But if my opponent, I kind of want my opponent to play the Knightly Valor on one of the pilgrims. And now I will play the Nantuko Husk. Now I will play the Nantuko Husk, since next turn I can double spell with the stab wound and the zing swoop out of the Ardenvale Tactician. But my opponent does not. My opponent does not deploy the Knightly Valor, and as a matter of fact, my opponent plays the worst card for me that he could have played. A Bazara Tower Archer, an X-proof creature. So now my opponent will play a Knightly Valor on the Bazara Tower Archer, and it will be a disaster for me since I have 3 removals in hand against my opponent playing green-white auras with X-proof creatures. So I don't really see a realistic way to claw back into this game. Screecher could do something, but notably this card has reach and will get vigilance next turn. So I will not be able to pass any flying damages whatsoever. I cannot tap this. I cannot exile it with Stasis Nair. So my only real avenue of victory is via those 2 stab wounds. So what will I do now is I could also just stay back with the rogue so that my opponent cannot attack with the 4-3 Bazara Tower Archer, or I double block the creature with the Ardenvale Tactician. That is probably the best for me. I could also just double block with a couple flyers. This is a 4-3, so it would just be a 1-for-1. So I should definitely just attack and play both of those. Maybe I can try and drain my opponent for a couple more damages with the extort ability of the Basilisk creature, but if my opponent plays something else on top of this Knightly Valor, we are definitely screwed. Like, for example, an unflinching courage, the aura that gives +2/+2 trample and lifelink on the Bazara Tower Archer would win the game on the spot. Now, Cartel Aristocrat is probably the best draw I could have hoped for, because this permanently checks the Tower Archer as long as the Archer doesn't have evasion. So there is a bestow creature That is fine. That is fine. You can grow the tower archer indefinitely. I still have the aristocrat to block, so that's more than fine. I will untap. And I will play a land. There's no way for me to attack. I will remind you, all of you, that this creature's reach. I cannot attack with my ground creatures. My only avenue of victory is for my opponent to deploy a creature with more than 3 toughness, and the creature needs to be targetable in order for me to try and win the game with stab wounds, and that's it. Now my opponent plays flinching courage, which is what I dreaded this whole time around. So the the unflinching courage arrived. Will my opponent start attacking? My opponent definitely should, absolutely should attack this turn since I have no blocks. I have 7 power. No, I could gang block the 8/7, but at that point, how am I winning the game? I'm not. And this creature generates tokens, extra tokens. Do I want to remove this with a stasis near? Probably. I could. Am I all that much intimidated by a 2/2 that generates extra blockers? This is good just in case my opponent alpha strikes and I can stasis near at instant speed a creature uh, on my opponent plays a combat trick on. So I will chill for a turn. I will play a Kabira takedown. Yes, the 4th removal against Green White. Now you see the true power of Green White Express is going against Black White mid range and winning accordingly. And there's really nothing I can do. Can straight up scoop now. My opponent will play another aura, another bestow creature. We got soloed by Bazara Tower Archer. Yes, does this exile enchantments by any chances? No, this card basically does everything. It's a card that gives my the Bazara Tower Archer +4/+4 and draws 4 cards. I will I will just continue playing just for my opponent to have an adrenaline rush, because at this point, in this position, this game is completely lost. Now I will continue on playing because I really want to see what did my opponent splash. My bet is on Blood Baron of Scopa, the Black White, Mythic, the Vampire, the 4/4 Vampire. Also, I find this offensive. My opponent should really attack with the 13/12 lifelink, trample, reach, vigilance creature. My opponent is not attacking for reasons unbeknownst to humanity, but it is what it is. I will play a Felstinger. I will drain my opponent for 1. And now this checks the Tower Archer, though. If my opponent does not give a first strike to the Tower Archer, but my opponent will probably do. Do I play this? Maybe. What's the value of keeping Kabira takedown open? I don't really know. I lose 1 X short value, but I lost this game. This game is lost. There's no way for me to win this game. My only ever hope is for my opponent to forget that in Magic you can indeed attack with your creature, especially if your creatures are really large. Now my opponent gets reminded. My opponent has removal, and now finally my opponent attacks with the 13/2. There's nothing I can do. This creature has trample. Even if I block with the aristocrat and sacrifice a creature to give the aristocrat protection from green, I will still take 11 trample damages. So I just take the full 13 to my face. My opponent might as well just have a Emrakul in their deck at this point. There's no way for me to win this game. I'm just playing for funsies to mainly out of curiosity to see what my opponent is splashing. My opponent is splashing Imperious Oligarch in their green-white auras. This makes me feel extra bad because this is such a huge deck building mistake. I think we would have easily won this game if not for exactly the X-Proof creature against our full removal hand. But I mean, it is what it is. It is what it is. You have to accept this is something that could and will happen in Pioneer Masters. Um, Now, there's nothing else we can do. Maybe I can bestow this on the aristocrat and I don't know, extort for fun. Maybe my opponent refuses to attack again. I just want my opponent to show me what is the real splash. if if this is all the splash my opponent has, I feel extra sad for this loss. But it is what it is. Please do not splash two drops in your green white deck, especially two drops that do not contribute to the general game plan of the color pair. So I get attacked for 13, I can gang block with everything. I will refuse to, I will say good game. I cannot. I would have said good game to my opponent. You still need to respect your opponent's will to win. So we went 3-3, which is fine. Generally, it's what I expected more or less out of this deck. Maybe it could have gone 4-3. What did this deck lack? Not really all that much. Uh, we lost games, the 3 games that were out of our reach. We lost against Blue Black Control, a game where we molded to 6 on the play. We drew more removals than needed and flooded out in the end, whereas my opponent kept drawing removals. There was no way to win that game. We just drew poorly. Then we lost again against Black Red. That was unfortunate. This is a deck that is well suited against Black Red. It's suited to defeat Black Red. Unfortunately, my Black Red opponent started with a 1 drop. I started aggressively. My opponent went 1 drop into 2 drop into 3 drop, 3 drop, etc., etc. And that was too much pressure to try and withstand with our Felstinger draw, which is really good in most of the situations, except an aggro draw out of my opponents specifically. And then we lost the game against Green White Auras, which is a ridiculous matchup. Ridiculous in the sense that we don't really match up all that great against Green White Auras. We are a mid range deck, chock full of small creatures with premium removals that need to be pointed out to my opponent's threats. But if my opponent's threat is has X-proof, there's nothing I can do. So 3-3 in line with what we want out of a deck with no real rares or bombs. So, if you liked this kind of content, I wanted to produce a video in American for a change, since I made Italian videos up until now. If you really like this content, please let me know, maybe in the comments. Please a like, and if you really like this kind of video, you may consider to subscribe to my channel. Uh, this is not the first draft I I put out in American. This is not the last, definitely. There will be many more. Drafting is my passion. I draft every each time I have an hour spare, an hour left out of my work. So my channel will only keep growing, and I will only keep putting out more and more draft videos not only of Pioneer Masters, but it will also draft Foundations, and will also draft Ether Drift, the expansion that will come out in February a ton. So please consider subscribing to my channel. That will really help me, Cameo Black Optics, to grow and reach a broader audience with my videos. I will thank you for your patience. Thank you for staying with me this much time. I um, say thank you and see you next time for more and more funny draft. Goodbye.